concert pianist Simone Dinnerstein, famed for the Goldberg variations. When I interviewed her in her home studio, I came not as a classical music critic, nor as a piano pedagogue, but as myself, a student of the piano and an amateur pianist. I'm pleased to present the resulting video to all of you, followers of Grand Piano Passion. Miss Dinnerstein treats us to a private rendition of the Bach Prelude in B minor, part of her new album, Night. The music is a transcription by the composer Alexander Salati and is based on Bach's original prelude in E minor. I'm Nancy Williams. Join me as Simone Dinnerstein uncovers the Bach Prelude in B minor, illustrating how all of us who revere classical piano music may deepen our study. I'm probably not alone in adult piano students in finding it to be very challenging to infuse my music with emotion. And I was wondering if you could share with us some of the techniques and approaches that you do to accomplish that.
One of the things that I really love about Bach is that you can try lots and lots of different ways. So, one of the things to do is, if there are any dynamic markings in the music, to just pay them no mind whatsoever, because none of it is his own marking.
Uh-huh.
When I studied with Peter Serkin, he had me do an interesting exercise when I was studying Bach, where he had me write a list of different adjectives, or adverbs even, and then play it in the style of each one. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to do, and it triggers your imagination in many different ways, and it can affect how you approach the articulation, or how you approach the dynamics, or the tempo. I used to teach adults, and when I taught them, I used to try to get them to try things in lots of different ways, and not to feel that there was a right way to do something, because there really isn't a right way or a wrong way. There's just, being thorough or not.
One of the things I noticed were those half notes in the treble, and I was very moved by the effect that you created with them.
Thank you.
And I wondered, do you think of those half notes as the cantus firmus, as the main voice in the piece?
So it's an inner voice. Right. Which I'm always drawn to.
It's not a main voice, it's an inner voice.
Well, no, it is the main voice, but it happens to be in the middle. It's the inner voice that's prominent. So you have this kind of melodic ostinato pattern in the treble, and then you have the inner voice, which has the main line, and then you have these kinds of rolled chords underneath that. So sometimes what's most important isn't in the most obvious place.
Why do you feel that you're in particular drawn to inner voices in the music that you select?
That's probably a very psychological question.
I didn't think of it that way, but
I think I like the underdog. I don't know. I think that melodies can be a little bit cheap, or obvious. And I like bass lines, and I like inner voices, because they are really the ground that everything else is working on.
I'm wondering if you could give some other pointers or ideas for approaching this music for people who are interested in studying it.
There's a whole question about playing evenly, which is something that pianists kind of obsess over. How do you make all of the notes even without anything standing out?
So evenly, say, within a broken chord.
A broken chord, or the pattern of the 16th note pattern that's happening in the right hand. There's that. Do you want to play it totally evenly, or do you want to play it with certain notes standing out? Is there a contour to what you're doing? The other thing to think about that's very important in this piece is the overall architecture. because it's easy to get really drawn into every luscious chord that happens, and you kind of have to think about how are they all building up over a period of time to say something larger. I find that very hard because I'm drawn to certain chords and I want to linger on them, and I do linger on them, but I think that I try to think very much about how it fits into the whole, and whether or not there is a shape and a kind of a course that the music is on.
It's interesting because right now I'm studying a classic, the Bach Prelude in C major, and I think a lot of the issues are similar there.
From the first book?
From the Well-Tempered Clavier, yes.
Okay.
And, many of the chords are beautiful in and of themselves, but the question is, how do you fit them together into a meaningful piece of music?
That's a very similar piece of music in that it is all about a chord progression, which is an amazing chord progression. You can never get tired of listening to that piece because it's so unusual and unexpected. So I think that another really important, or maybe even the most important part of playing the piano or playing any instrument is listening to what you're doing while you're playing it and responding to what you hear, because it's that openness to the changes that are taking place in the music and your response to that is really what communicates what's happening in that instant. And I think we can get really bogged down in trying to play and then stop listening. And as soon as you start listening, everything changes.
When did you first study the Bach Prelude in B minor, and what drew you to the music?
I had first heard it on YouTube, of all places. An incredible performance that Emil Gilels did of it in Moscow. And I just fell in love with the piece and knew that someday I wanted to play it.
What drew you to this particular performance that you heard on YouTube? What did you like about his interpretation?
In his performance, in Gilels' performance of it, it has a kind of quiet intensity to it. You feel that the whole concert hall and everyone sitting in the audience was completely drawn into his vision of this piece of music. I happen to feel that that particular prelude is one of these pieces of music that is looking way ahead into the future, to jazz, to, frankly, to contemporary pop music.
When I listened to your recording on your album Night, I felt that the music was very ethereal and it was very tender, and yet it also had a quality of resignation to it.
Well, I think resignation is a good word. I would say that I think there's a lot of pain in that prelude. And I don't know if I would use the word tender. I don't think it's tender for me. It's something that is deeply felt in a kind of painful way that moves through that to a place of resignation.
And how does that relate to your decision to include this music on the album Night, which is all about nocturnal feelings?
Night is about nocturnal feelings, but it's also about a time of freedom, a time when the lack of light is actually making you able to try something new. And I recorded this album with Tift Merritt, who's a fantastic singer-songwriter, sort of in the folk country, alt country, rock tradition. And we chose music for the album that was from our different genres, but we decided to relate the music to each other in our own way. So, for instance, we would do a song by Schubert, but Tift sang it in English. She rewrote the words to make it more sort of plain spoken. She played harmonica in part of it, and I changed some of the rhythm around. So I definitely wanted to have some Bach in the mix, but I wanted Bach that didn't seem too specifically from his period of time.
From, for example, the French or English suites.
No matter how you decide to play them, they're definitely Baroque. But some of Bach's music doesn't feel tied to a particular time frame to me, and this piece is one of those, in that you could just take those chords and play them in a different rhythm, different way, and you could probably layer a song on top of it. So when I did this recording of the prelude, I'm not even entirely following Silotti's transcription. I mean, I'm not playing exactly the rhythm that he wrote all the time. So I'm doing a kind of transcription of the transcription.
Right, reinvention.
Yeah.
That's great.